Hi, I'm Rob Cosman. Welcome to my shop. I'm often asked about woodworking joints. I'm going to suggest what I think are 6 that you need to know, particularly if you're just getting started. I'm going to go through them carefully one at a time. Stay with me. In fact, I'm going to show you 6 different joints. And just about anything you're going to build will use one of those or a variation of it. So you learn the basics. It doesn't take much to modify it to fit a certain application. There's certain basics that you need in terms of learning how to use chisels, planes, and saws, and layout tools or measuring tools, and you get that combined with the skills of doing these 6 basic joints, and you're all good to go. So let's go through one at a time, try to give you some examples of where it would be used and some basic information on how it's executed. Okay, the first one we're going to cover is called a dado, and I'm going to include in that what we would call a groove. A dado is a slot or a trench or a housing cut across the grain. If it's cut parallel to the grain, then it's referred to as a groove. Now, where would you use this? Well, the most typical would be if you're building a bookcase, your horizontal shelves and the bottom would fit into this dado. It provides great shear strength, and if there's enough of them and it's sufficiently deep, it can provide quite a bit of tensile strength as well. But it's a nice, strong way of joining horizontal members to vertical members when you're not talking about being on either corner. Now, how would you cut it? Actually, let me address this one first. How tight should it be? If it's too tight, particularly if it's on an end like this, and you force that in, that may very well cause that bottom piece to actually bow up a little bit. If it's too loose, then the glue is just not going to do the job and it's not going to be strong at all. You want it tight enough so that it doesn't actually fall apart without glue, but you want to be able to apply some glue and put that in there and have good contact on all 3 sides. Now, how would I cut this? If you're doing it strictly with hand tools, then you're going to use a crosscut saw to make very accurate and square cuts on both outside edges. In fact, if you want, you could even go in and make multiple cuts on the inside so that this material breaks off easily. I would go in with a chisel and clean up the bulk of it, and then I would use something called a router plane, which would go in and allow you to adjust the depth so it is uniform side to side. If you're doing it on power tools, the easiest way, if you don't have a lot of them, is just to use your table saw blade and make multiple passes, cleaning it up. Or if you've got a lot of them, you can use what's called a dado blade, which is multiple blades that you put together, and you can usually make it anywhere from 1/4 of an inch wide up to 13/16. So there's your dado. And of course, this is your groove, and if you're doing that, it makes for a very strong joint because of all the long grain glue surface, but it's a great way of indexing the 2 pieces as well. Now, in that same family, this is called a rabbet or a rebate. So kind of like a groove, but you're missing something on this side, so you're cutting out what we might call an L-shaped portion, and that allows this piece to fit in there. You think about the back of a cabinet or a bookcase, and you want to be able to have that back contained all the way around. A nice clean fitting rabbet, or you can actually use a groove in the same application, but this is a simpler one to do. How would I do this? Well, you could easily cut this with a shoulder plane. You could cut it with any plane that allows you to cut right to the edge, any form of a rabbeting plane. As far as power tools, the easiest way to do it is to make one cut with your table saw like this, and another one coming up like this against the fence, and you can easily remove that material. You want a nice square surface in here so that when you put the 2 pieces together, you get a nice tight fit on this side and you get a nice tight fit on the inside. Lots of long grain glue surface available if that's what you're going to, or if that's what you have or in need of. Now, this is where folks would start to look at it and say, oh, this is too complicated, but it really isn't. I spend most of my time teaching people basic woodworking joints, And I teach hundreds of people every year how to cut dovetails, especially working with vets. And you'd be amazed at the first one they cut. It does require good, accurate tools. It requires good instruction and a little bit of practice, and you can pull off a joint that would amaze most people. Think of it as the joint of choice for making a box or a cabinet that stands up, or any kind of a case where you have a right angle corner. It's called a through dovetail because you see the ends of the pins from one side, you see the ends of the tails from the other side, so it's all of it is exposed. Lots of glue surface. There's some basic knowledge in terms of the layout so that you're not weakening one piece by making one part too big and the other one not big enough. But just lots of glue surface, really strong, very decorative joint. You can do it with a router, but my option, and the one that I think you should use, is actual hand tools. So you need a dovetail saw, you need a couple of chisels, you need a marking gauge, and a few other layout tools, and it's not that difficult. It looks it, but when you break it down one step at a time, it's really quite simple. It just requires a level of precision that you have to raise up to, and once you do that, you've got it. And once you've learned to cut through dovetails, it's an easy transition to go into what we call a half blind. Referred to as a half blind because you only see it from one side. This is the most common joint that you're going to find in a drawer. So typical of what you're going to find is a half blind in the front, and the drawer is closed, you don't see any joinery, and then on the back would be your through dovetail where you see both sides of it. What's difficult about a half blind is that you don't get to make that saw cut all the way through when you're cutting the pins. So there's quite a bit of chisel work involved, and it has to be done accurately. But it has a great strength, lots of glue surface, extremely decorative, and looks fantastic when you open up that drawer. I always try to make sure that I have good contrast between the piece that has the tails, which would be the drawer side, and the drawer front, so that they really stand out and you get lots of bang for your buck. How do you cut them? Again, they can be cut with routers, but why do that? This involves similar tools to the through dovetail, except for the fact that you're working into a closed surface when you're cutting out these sockets. So I have some specialized tools. A chisel is the shape of a dovetail, so you can get into those corners. A couple of other small ones. We will make reference to those videos in the notes down below. But a through dovetail, if it takes 10 minutes to do a corner that size, a half blind is going to take you somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes. So just factor that in when it comes to how much time it's going to take you to build something. Now these last few joints are all going to be based around what we call a mortise and tenon. I'll start off with the simplest one. This is often called a bridle joint or an open mortise and tenon, where you have one piece fitting in between two others. Now, this looks awful flimsy, but you have to understand that the best you can do is divide the piece up into three equal parts. In other words, I could make this a lot wider and make it a lot stronger, but that means the two outside pieces on the opposite are going to be a lot thinner and consequently a lot weaker. So we typically, as a rule, use 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 as the gauge for how to size the pieces. You want it to fit just right, and by that I mean if this piece is too big, it's going to cause these to spread, possibly splitting it. If it's too small, it's not going to have good contact, and when you squeeze it together with a clamp to glue it, you're going to have an offset here. So it takes a fair bit of work to get it to be done right. You can use it anywhere there's a frame. So if you built a door, and this is your outside frame, you could use it. It can be used decoratively. You get to see the end grain contrasting against the long grain. Anywhere you have a right angle corner on a narrow piece of stock like that, you could use that type of a joint. So that's referred to as a bridle joint or a open mortise and tenon. And typically the tools that you're going to use on something like this, if you're doing a table saw, it's actually quite simple. With your fence, running that over your table saw blade until you have the width that you want, and then you can do the same thing, running this over the table saw blade, leaving this piece left, trim off these two shoulders, and there you go. It's an easy joint to do. You can also do it with hand tools. It involves some very careful layout and cutting, but you would use something like a tenon saw, and then I often would go back in and use that same router plane, which allows you to get at least this piece precise. Now there's bigger versions of this that you would want to use in order to be able to access way out here, but that's all doable. And you can even use a small one like this by simply adding a longer base, so you have lots of reference on this side as you're reaching way out to adjust that part. This one is a lot of chisel work, but doesn't take that much. Again, get accurate with chisel saws and planes, and you can cut just about any joint there is. Hey, if you like this video, we have more. Our newsletter has subscriber-only content, monthly discount on tools, and anything we bring out that's new, subscribers get first crack at it. Click on the link below. Let's get back to work. We'll wrap this up with the more traditional mortise and tenon. I've got two examples here, two variations. Think of this one as if you were building a bed, and this is going to be the bed rail. This is the headboard. So this piece would come into a much wider surface. And then the other would be anytime you're using something with a frame, again, a door, the pieces are going to be relatively narrow, so you're going to, again, use that third rule. Well, let's talk about this one first. Now, if I was doing this and I want maximum glue surface, that means I want to have my tenon as long as I can. The longer and the deeper it is, the more contact surface. It has to be very precise. Again, the glues that we use in woodworking typically don't fill gaps, so if this is wiggling about in there, the glue's not going to do you any good at all. If it's too tight and you force it together, all the glue's going to be pushed to the bottom, and you're essentially just going to have a mechanically fit drawer that, a mechanically fit joint that with a little bit of working it back and forth, it's going to break free, and you don't want that. So you want it to be precise enough that it actually makes contact on both sides, so that when you put the glue in there, you get a good strong joint. This is referred to as the tenon. This would be the cheek of the tenon. This is the shoulder. The only part of this joint that you ever see when it's together is the interaction between the shoulder and the face of the opposite piece. So that's where you want to be careful to make sure it's nice and neat, and hopefully you never see the joint after you put it together, because if you do, it has failed. Now, as far as the depth, you want to go as deep as you can to get as much glue surface as you can, but if you go too deep, you risk having the backside telegraph over time. So I like to leave usually a good 1/8 of an inch on the bottom, if not a bit more. Now this one is done a little bit differently, just because we're talking about a frame, so both pieces are the same thickness. What I often do when I have something this wide, rather than have a great big huge mortise, this rectangular hole, which would make these two outside cheeks rather weak, I like to separate into two, leaving some connective tissue here, which makes these two, I think, a little bit stronger. It doesn't do much to harm this. Of course, you're losing a bit of material, but it's still a nice strong joint. It improves the leverage, and you get a really good fit. And just a really fun joint to make, but again, it's one of those ones you never see it after it's been completed. But it is critical that the fit be just right. I never worry about trying to clean out the bottom. It's the end grain of the tenon that's touching down there. I just make the bottom a little bit deeper. Don't worry about the surface of it. All my main glue surface is going to be the sides of the tenon and the inside surfaces of the mortise. Glue those up carefully, and you'll end up with a good joint that will last for centuries. Now, in wrapping this up, there's some tools that you're going to want. My advice is always buy the very best tools. You buy the best hand tools, you just have to learn how to use them. You buy not so good tools, you not only have to learn to use them, you have to learn to compensate for them. So this is the tenon saw, which just gives you a little more depth of cut. Typically use this for cutting what I would call furniture-sized mortise and tenon joints. What's interesting about mortise is everything is based off of the chisel. You'll notice that the chisel has parallel sides, unlike a typical chisel where it has a bevel on the side. And this is so that when it's chopping it down in the hole, that mortise, or that hole that's left over, the sides are going to be parallel to each other. That's why it's critical to have a series of mortise chisels so you can actually pick one for whichever size the job needs to be. This is called a mortise gauge. Since everything goes off of your chisel, You use your mortise gauge to transfer that exact dimension by simply squeezing the chisel between the two cutters, tightening it up, and now when you go lay out the other part, that gives you the exact dimension of your mortise chisel. Some critical tools to think about. Now, if you want some really good information on this, Ernest Joyce wrote a book back in 1971, I believe, called The Encyclopedia of Furniture Making. It was revised by Alan Peters in 1987. And this goes through and gives you all kinds of information on all different types of woodworking joints. It talks about both hand tool operations and power tool operations. And it's just a great resource. If you can find it, I would highly recommend you add that to your library. Buy good tools. Take a little bit of time to learn how to use them. Bit of practice goes a long way. And if you master these 6 joints, you can pretty much build anything that you want. It's just some variation of what you've done. Remember, chisels, saws, and planes. Learn how to use those, and you've got it down. Good luck. If you like my work and enjoy my style of teaching, click on any one of these videos and help take your woodworking to the next level. I've always said, better tools make the job so much easier. If you click on the link below, the chisel and plane icon, it'll take you to our site and introduce you to all the tools that we actually manufacture right here in our shop. It'll also give you information on our online and in-person workshops.